Welcome to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to give you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode, which was lovingly crafted thanks to Drea from Wisco, which I assume is Wisconsin, maybe. The title of the review, Midwest Mama Loves This Podcast, 5 stars. I'm only 4 episodes into this podcast, but I'm really enjoying it. Found it from Ben Greenfield's podcast. As a mom with toddlers contemplating my education philosophies, I've enjoyed the focus on how we learn and how we develop change makers in this world. Love the plant-based eating discussion about great gut health. Keep it up. Well, thank you so much, Drea. I really appreciate your review. And if you haven't left one, you are running out of time because we are now in our final 10-episode stretch before we bring the show to an end at episode 300. And as you know, I've been focused on getting you the absolute best guests that we can and the most interesting and impactful discussions so that we can end this thing on a high note. And today's episode is no exception. Today, I was joined by Dr. Enric Sala. He's a National Geographic explorer in residence dedicated to restoring the health and productivity of the ocean. He's authored over 120 scientific publications, which are widely recognized and used for real-world conservation efforts, such as the creation of marine reserves. He founded and leads National Geographic's Pristine Seas, a project that combines exploration, research, and media to inspire country leaders to protect the last wild places in the ocean. And to date, they've created 13 of the largest marine reserves on the planet, covering an area of, get this, 4.5 million square kilometers. Dr. Sala has also received a ton of awards, including the Young Global Leaders Award by the World Economic Forum, the 2013 Research Award from the Spanish Geographical Society, and many more. Now, you might be wondering, what does an environmentalist and conservationist have to do with being superhuman? Well, if you've listened to the last 289 episodes, you know that so much of optimizing our health is dependent on the health of our planet. It's dependent on things like being able to get healthy and high-quality foods and being able to enjoy sunshine and nature and fresh air. And lately, I've been more and more concerned about the state of our planet and about the condition we are leaving it in for the next generation. And yet, like so many of you, I've felt powerless, and I've not known how I, not an engineer, not a politician, not a leader of a Fortune 500 company, how can I make a difference and ensure that we all have a place to live that is habitable for us 50 years from now? So in this quest, I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Sala, who it turns out is a big fan of the show, and ask him, why is this important and how can we actually make a difference? So I think you're going to be very empowered by this episode. I certainly was. There are some real actions that you can take because I know all of you superhumans really care about being able to act on what you learn. And in this episode, you're going to learn not only why the health of our oceans is so important to our health, but also how you can take action and how you can make a difference. I don't think the episode is going to disappoint. So, without any further ado, Dr. Enric Sala. Dr. Enric Sala, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan.
I'm really excited. And I didn't know before we hit record that you were actually a listener of the podcast as well. So I'm really honored to have you here and really excited to chat today.
Well, I love superhumans.
That is awesome. And I'm really excited about today's episode because literally just the other day, and one of the reasons that you so stood out to me is just the other day, my wife and I were watching Planet Earth and feeling so powerless and so dejected and so upset. So I'm really looking forward in today's episode to just learn what we everyday superhumans can do and why and how we need to take better care of our planet. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, I do want to ask you, Dr. Sala, before we get into all of that, you kind of have the bio of like the world's most interesting man. Tell me a little bit about how your career started. How you have the title of doctor, and yet you travel around the world adventuring and going into some of the most beautiful environments on the planet, and you've won all these awards. Tell me a bit about your career and how it started.
Yeah, well, it was everything planned since the very beginning. No. No, actually, I've been so obsessed about the ocean and nature since I was a little boy growing up on the Mediterranean coast of Spain. And, watching the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, I was completely fascinated by the ocean. I wanted to be an ocean explorer. And I was born a little too late for that, for being a diver in Cousteau's ship, the Calypso. But I'm doing it myself now. And I became a marine biologist. I became a professor at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California. But then one day, I realized that what I was doing, I was studying the impacts of fishing, global warming on ocean life. I was seeing the places that I love so much being depleted of life more and more. And one day I realized that all I was doing was writing the obituary of ocean life. I felt like the doctor who's telling you how you're going to die, but not offering a cure. So I decided to quit my job in academia and became a full-time conservationist. And this is why I went to National Geographic and proposed a crazy idea that was going to be the next phase of my life.
Tell me about that crazy idea.
The crazy idea was to use what National Geographic is known for: exploration, research, and media, to inspire communities and country leaders to protect the last wild places in the ocean. And I came to National Geographic in 2008, proposing to go to one place per year for 5 years and try to get these places protected. And in their infinite wisdom, they love the idea. I moved to Washington, D.C., and we have been to 30 places in the last 12 years.
That's incredible. Good for you.
Thank you. No, the best part is that 22 of these places are now fully protected from human activities like fishing, oil drilling, mining, covering an area over half the size of the United States. So that's has been very, very fulfilling. We could have never dreamed, not even in our wildest dreams, we would have thought that we would be part of helping to protect so much of the ocean.
Incredible. Now, I have so many questions about how all that works and how we can get involved. But first, I teach learning, and I think a lot about how people learn. And I know that people need to understand why this is so important. So I want to ask, there are a lot of, there's no better way to say this. We're screwing up the environment in so many ways. We're damaging the air and we're damaging the forests. But why are the oceans so important to you particularly?
Well, the oceans are important to everybody on the planet. So let's get into the doom and gloom for a little bit now here.
Absolutely.
Just the amount that there is all this water out there. This water, the ocean, has absorbed 90% of the extra heat generated by human activities since the Industrial Revolution. There is so much heat in the ocean. The ocean has warmed so much that if it weren't for the ocean, the temperature here at sea level would be 36 degrees Celsius higher. This is exactly 36 degrees is the temperature that we get on a super hot, the hottest day of the year in Washington, D.C. in the summer. Not 2 degrees, which is the goal not to exceed, the target not to exceed by the Paris Climate Agreement, 36 degrees. And that just tell us that without the ocean, we would be toast. The Earth would be like Venus. There would be no conditions for human habitation here. But also the ocean gives us so much. Most of the oxygen that we breathe in the atmosphere comes from the activity of bacteria and microscopic algae that live in the ocean.
Right.
The ocean gives us 90 million tons of food every year. It supports livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people. It's the main source of animal protein for 1.5 billion people. It stabilizes the climate. It helps produce rain. It gives us medicines. There are so many medicines that come from marine sponges, for example. Coral reefs and mangrove forest on the shore, they protect our shores from the destructive power of storm waves. So there are so many things. The ocean is an essential part of our life support system. That's why we need to care.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, and I'm glad to hear you say that to our audience, because I think a lot of people think, well, we're land animals, and it's a tragedy if the oceans are destroyed. But really, we need to be more concerned about life here on land. And I think so many people don't realize just how interconnected. I certainly didn't realize until a few years ago how interconnected everything is, and how the ocean plays a part of this much, much bigger system. Tell me a bit more about that and your experiences of it.
Yeah, this is what we call the biosphere, the living layer at the surface of our planet. There is life from 3 kilometers underground, microbes that live on the rock, all the way to the clouds where there are bacteria living on clouds. But still, this is a very thin layer of life on our planet. And we think there are 9 million species of plants and animals, and 1 trillion with a T, 1 trillion different types of microbes. And all these species interdepend, and they form these wonderful ecosystems: the coral reefs, the kelp forest, tropical forest, wetlands, peat bog, marshes, and this is something that we humans cannot recreate. And to me, the best demonstration of this interdependence and interconnectedness is this COVID pandemic. Because yes, what you said, I hear all the time, well, I live in Idaho. No, I don't really, I'm not affected by what happens in the ocean, right? Or people will think, well, climate change is something that will happen to somebody else. Or Ebola, yeah, this is something affecting people in West Africa. No, we are here in the rich world, in the United States, in our bubble. We are immune from all these things. But this is not true. And the COVID pandemic, I think, has been very clear that it takes only one human to be infected by a virus coming from a wild animal for the entire world to suffer. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dead people. So many tens of millions of people have lost their jobs. The International Monetary Fund is talking about $9 trillion in economic loss for the next couple of years. Why? Because some people trade with wildlife, some people manipulate, eat, use wild animals as pet or medicine, and the health, the well-being, the survival, the personal safety of the richest person in the world is dependent on the health, the well-being of the poorest person in the poorest country. So we are all connected. And if somebody doesn't believe it, I mean, what world do they live in? The COVID pandemic is, I think, the strongest, the loudest wake-up call for humanity.
Do you think it will serve as an effective wake-up call? Because on the one hand, I've been inspired by the actions of some people, and I've been very troubled by the actions of other people or corporations who I think haven't gotten the message and haven't drawn the connection. In your work, have you already seen an inflection point, either for good or for bad, in the impact on the environment?
I think we've seen a blip. The global carbon emissions went down for a little bit, but they are up to pre-COVID levels now, especially in countries like China. We've seen animals on videos online, dolphins and whales coming closer to shore, deer and even mountain lions coming into cities. And this is a blip because we see people wanting to go back to normal. But the problem is that going back to normal is the worst thing we can do, because the pandemic has really shown that the emperor had no clothes, right? That our socioeconomic system was built on very weak, very shaky foundations, and that we have been destroying the nature that could have protected us from this pandemic, right? So it's like we are at the hospital connected to a life support system, and we're just unplugging the different parts of the life support system. So I hope that people will realize, because everybody's affected. But even though citizens can do a lot, we need political leadership, and some countries have shown it, and some other countries have not. So we have an opportunity in the next election for people to vote for leaders who share their environmental values.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, before we get more into, because one of my goals for this episode is really to give people practical, actionable items, but I do want to ask, what are the kind of major causes or major areas of ocean and environmental conservation that are at the forefront? I know, people talk a lot about plastic in the oceans. People talk a lot about coral reefs dying. They talk a lot about temperature going up. Could you kind of lay the land? What are you most concerned about reversing? Or is it all in one? Is it all one cause, which is stop abusing our oceans?
Well, that's for sure. That's true. But there are three main things. One is climate change, global warming, which is warming the ocean and turning it more acidic, killing coral reefs and many other species around the world. And the solution to that is phase off fossil fuels and shift to a renewable energy economy. Number two is too much fishing. We have been taking fish out of the ocean faster than they can reproduce. 90% of the large fish, the sharks, tuna, grouper, scott, are gone in the last 100 years alone. But only 7% of the ocean is protected. So what we need to do is to reduce the amount of boats in the water, reduce the fishing effort, and protect much more of the ocean in marine reserves, national parks in the sea, so the ocean can replenish and continue to feed us. And three is pollution. Some pollution you can see, like plastics, and some pollution you cannot see, like mercury or heavy metals that are caused by human activities. For example, the mercury that comes to you in your tuna fillet is something that the tuna have accumulated by eating thousands of sardines, which have in turn eaten tens of thousands of little shrimp, which in turn have eaten millions of little microscopic algae that have absorbed some of that mercury and other pollutants from the water. And this mercury comes from the atmosphere, which comes from the burning of coal in power plants. So, everything is connected. So you can be that person in Idaho eating your tuna fillet that you buy on your supermarket, and you are eating the toxins that we release through burning coal on the United States, for example, right? So these are the three main things: global warming, too much fishing, and pollution. And the problem is that you cannot tackle one and expect the world to heal. You need to tackle all of them because they all act in synergy. They all act together.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Sala, one thing that I always hear pushback from, from folks like Vladimir Putin, as an example, they push back and say, well, the economy depends on fishing and it depends on fossil fuels. And what do you want us to do? We can't just stop the economy and stop economic development. What's your argument for folks like that?
Yeah, that's a myth perpetuated by the people whose interests are short-term and greedy and based on the destruction of nature. These are the arguments that you hear from the CEOs of fossil fuel companies, the cattle lobby, the industrial agricultural lobby, the agrochemical industry lobby, right? But again, look at what happened with this pandemic. The cost to the world is hundreds of thousands of deaths, maybe, hopefully not, millions of people dead, and trillions of dollars in economic loss. The economy is in shambles. So many businesses are gone. They are not going to go back because they were based on the ability of people to get together. Right? So again, what's the cost of this pandemic? Wildlife, trade, and consumption, and the destruction of natural habitats where these species live. But the world is spending right now, governments are subsidizing activities. They are propping up industries that destroy nature, that destroy these habitats to the tune of $500 billion per year. Okay. Now, how much would it cost to do the actions that would prevent or reduce the risk of the next pandemic? We believe that we need to protect at least 30%. That's what the science is telling us. We need to protect at least 30% of the planet, land and sea, by 2030 in national parks, marine reserves, natural reserves, etc. The cost of managing a network of protected areas covering that 30% would be $140 billion per year. This is almost 3 times less than what the world's governments are spending in destroying nature, increasing the risk for the next pandemic. $140 billion is less than what the world spends today on video games. The money is there. We just use it for contributing to destroy our nature, our life support system.
Now, 140 billion also includes lost revenue from things like logging, fishing, stuff like that, or that's the cost out of pocket to set up these wildlife protection zones?
Okay, so that's the deal. 140 billion is the cost of creating and managing these protected areas. But the global economic output of the world would be up to at least $1 trillion larger than today if we protect the 30%. Because these protected areas, at least before COVID, received an increasing number of tourism, which helps bring revenue to keep these places protected and employs local people and provides new economic opportunities and jobs for local people. So while the protected area tourism was increasing between 5 and 7% every year, agriculture was increasing less than 1%. Forestry was growing less than 1%. Fisheries globally was shrinking, minus 1.5%. It's negative growth. It's in a depression, a recession, right? So all these activities that destroy nature at an unsustainable rate are not sustainable, and they are going to create many more costs. If you cut a forest, you're going to reduce the amount of carbon that the forest could absorb, which only helps to exacerbate climate change. You will remove the ability of the forest to retain rainwater and preventing floods downstream. You will remove the ability of the forest to filter water for free without the need of water treatment plants. So there are all these benefits that nature provides that in many cases we only realize what they are when we have to pay the cost for not having them.
Right. Well, and it's the costs eventually far outpace, as we're seeing with COVID.
By far, right? And so the global economic output with 13% protection would be greater than the business as usual with no more protected areas. Same thing for fossil fuels. There are all these economic reports produced by very senior, respected global economists that show that even though the investment costs right now in the short term might seem large, in the long term, the economic benefits to humanity are much, much, much greater if we shifted to a renewable energy economy, right? So the only people who are interested in perpetuating the status quo are those who have interest in these companies that destroy nature for short-term profit.
So the idea is really we need to stomach the blow now, make the investments, go through half a decade or a decade of I guess, tightening our belts to cut ourselves off of fossil fuels or to find alternative protein sources rather than overfishing the ocean. And kind of, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's we need to go through a few years of really challenging times to avoid much, much worse and much, much more prolonged suffering as our species could essentially become extinct.
Yes, only that these don't need to be challenging times, really, because now we are going through a very, very challenging time because we have not invested in more protection of nature, right? And the more we wait, you hear this, you probably read the news about New York. If the city had come in lockdown 2 weeks earlier, and they could have prevented 20,000 deaths or something like that, right? So the more you wait, same thing happened with the rest of the United States. The more you waited for the lockdown, the more deaths we saw. So the more we wait to transition to a clean energy economy, to transition to more protection of nature, so nature can continue providing for us, the more costly it's going to be in the short term. So the more we wait, the more we are going to believe that we cannot afford it. But again, the world decided that human health, that personal survival was a priority. And governments have found trillions of dollars, right, to be able to cope with the short-term needs of taking care of people in need, taking care of economic recovery. So the money is there. We have been using it for the things that destroy our life support system instead of investing in it. That's how irrational we humans are.
All right, let's take a quick pause and thank this episode's sponsor, BlueBlox blue light blocking glasses, the only blue light blocking company in the world that create evidence-backed lenses for filtering blue and green light. Their Australian lab-built lens technology is fitted into the most fashionable frames, and they can even make prescription and reading glasses in their optics lab. So whether you want to wear their Sleep Plus glasses that block 100% of blue and green light, their Summer Glow mood booster glasses, or even blue light computer glasses that don't have a yellow tint, BlueBlox has you covered. Now, I like to wear the Sleep Plus glasses 2 to 3 hours before bed, and they really, really help your sleep. I also like to wear the daytime ones for reducing digital eye strain, headaches, and lowering stress. Now, BlueBlox has free and fast worldwide shipping, and if you use code SUPERHUMAN at checkout, you can get 15% off any pair that you want. Just go to blueblox.com, that's BLUBLOX.com, and enter code SUPERHUMAN to save 15%. All right, let's get back to the episode. Now, I hear everything you're saying. I think a lot of us feel powerless. I often, when I think about these problems, wish that I'd been an engineer, because then I could be working on sustainable energy solutions. I was joking with my wife, we're expecting, and I kept joking with her, my father pushed me to be a businessman and entrepreneur, and I'm going to push my kids to be engineers, because there are so many huge problems that engineers need to solve. And most of us don't have a lot of political influence, and that seems to be the two ways that we can make a difference, is political influence and changing the way money is spent at a government level, or engineering new solutions. What would you say to the everyday person or everyday superhuman listening to the show? I mean, what are some of the ways that we can actually make a difference?
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations to you and your wife.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Everybody, I hear this a lot, that, I'm just one person. What can I do? In the same way you hear, well, I'm just one person. If I throw away trash, it's just one person. What's my impact is insignificant. Well, you might think your negative impact is insignificant, but if you multiply it times 7 billion, it's a pretty big impact. Positive impact happens the same way. If we were able to multiply individual positive impact times billions, there would be a global benefits to humanity and the planet. But there are so many things people can do, but there are two things that everybody can do. One is vote, especially in the United States this fall. We are at the critical juncture where we need to make those decisions that you were alluding to about giving more space to nature and phasing off fossil fuels. So people have to vote for the candidate that shares their environmental values. And I'm not going to say anything more about this, but people have to vote and make their voice heard. Don't come to me afterwards and complain, if you haven't voted. So that's one. The other one is something that everybody can do every day, hopefully, which is eat more plants and less animals. That's good for your health. You can get all the nutrients, micronutrients, proteins, calories you need from plants. You can eat, I'm not saying don't eat meat, but eat much less meat, because in the United States, for example, 41% of the land is used to raise livestock. 41%. It's a huge amount of land for meat that produces less than 20% of the calories that we eat. So we don't need to waste so much fresh water, which is so scarce. We don't need so much land for producing animal protein, because we can get that protein from plants. So much of this land that wouldn't be used to raise livestock could be given back to nature, and then nature will be able to provide all these other benefits for us. And economically, something that I didn't mention before was that for every dollar that we invest in nature, nature gives us at least $5 back in different benefits.
Wow. That's fascinating. Tell me more.
In the United States, there is more. For every dollar that the government invests in our national parks, that produces $10 in economic output. That's 1,000 per 100 return on investment. And this is money that goes to the guides and hotels and restaurants and service industry. Right? These are local jobs to cater for the people who come to see these wonderful beauties. People don't. There is no business on a Superfund site. A place that is full of toxins. People don't go to see these places. People go to see nature, where people can feel this personal healing and this spiritual renewal, and that generates a lot of money. In the United States, $1 to $10. It's crazy. There are few industries that have that return on investment. So we do need more land, and the science is clear. Again, we need at least 30% of the planet protected. So if everybody ate more plants and less animals, we would have a cascade of effects that would release some land for nature, but also would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, carbon emissions, because livestock are known for producing a lot of methane, which is mostly through burping. And methane is a greenhouse gas that has a global warming effect 25 times greater than CO2, than carbon dioxide. So this would be my recommendation. Eat more plants and less animals.
That's a fantastic start for sure. And I'm also invested in a alternative energy fund called the Carnivore Fund, where they're looking at making animal products without the animals in a way that's even in some cases more efficient than growing the plants. I mean, if you can replicate cells. So I encourage people as well, in addition to eating more plants, be on the lookout, because there are so many incredible new products coming out. I mean, the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Burger are just the very, very beginning of a new industry of foods that are going to be even more efficient than the other alternatives that we have, which I think is a really cool start. I also am a big composter, and I recommend a lot of people check that out, because I believe it's also methane, right? If you're throwing away biomass and it's getting trapped in a landfill, it's also creating greenhouse gases, which you can very easily turn into wonderful fuel and for your garden. And many of us go out and buy potting soil, which is crazy when you can make your own.
I like that. I like that very much. And still people may think, yeah, okay, I'll vote, but if my candidate doesn't win and we get out of the Paris Climate Agreement and we destroy more of our environment and our kids get sick because they are just playing outside, then my impact has been irrelevant. And I would say no, because there are many scales at which people can help. I work with governments to create these very large national parks in the ocean, and I have seen nature come back spectacularly. It works. You just need to give nature some space, and life comes back really fast, especially in the ocean. The ocean has this extraordinary ability to bounce back. And I've been seeing places that were completely degraded, and now you dive there and you are surrounded by large fish. It's extraordinary. And of course, that generates tourism, jobs, and revenue that helps to replenish the areas around these marine reserves. So the fishermen around them are catching more now. They are making more money because there is this engine of replenishment. So these protected areas shouldn't be seen as a cost, as a burden, as a luxury for rich people. They should be seen as engines of regeneration, replenishment, economic development. And this is something that can be done at the local level. There are groups out there rewilding their abandoned agricultural fields near their towns, or making their city parks greener, or planting more trees. And all of these things, from the local level, from your block in your city to your town to your country, all of these things have incredible benefits, especially health benefits. There's a lot of research showing that people are in better health when they are close to protected areas, when they are close to nature. Even city parks, urban parks, have this extraordinary ability to provide this personal, individual healing. And globally, the effect is extraordinary. There is a study that estimated that the added value, economic value of people's improvement in health because they are visiting national parks or because they go to nature is $6 trillion every year. Trillion. It's extraordinary. So we cannot underestimate the power of nature, from your city block to a national park, to heal people, to create these superhumans with better moods, better health, better immune systems, less prone to have cardiovascular and respiratory and also mental illness.
Absolutely. Now, I want to know as well, I mean, I'm trying to do everything I can as well. And a lot of things that I've done, like purchase carbon offset credits, feel like they're very land focused, right? Like when I go online and buy carbon offset credits for flights I take, it's someone on land who is, basically keeping a piece of land dedicated to carbon sequestering. Are there places where I can have a meaningful and tangible impact for things like plastic in the oceans or overfishing? I mean, are there ways that I can directly contribute to the ocean besides, the two things that we said?
Yeah, it's a market that hasn't grown as much as the terrestrial market. There are forests of mangroves, these trees that grow on seawater. They grow on the limit between the land and the sea. And these forests can capture 10 times more carbon than tropical forests, hectare by hectare, right? So there are projects where you can buy carbon offsets to replant mangrove forest. The problem is that they haven't, they don't happen at the scale, at the carbon schemes that you have for the land. And now we are looking at, also we have a study coming out soon that shows that protecting more of the ocean, protecting key areas of the ocean, not only would protect marine life and help to replenish the areas around, so there will be better fishing, but also more protection can help the ocean store more carbon and help mitigate climate change. So we are now looking into this and see how we could use a carbon market to fund the creation of marine protected areas to help the ocean store more carbon. But it's in its infancy. We are not as advanced as the forests and land carbon capture mechanisms that you were mentioning.
Yeah. Well, I'll be excited to see it. I had an idea the other day, which I'm pretty sure someone else has had the idea, but I was telling my wife, if I could pre-purchase clean electricity. Say, for example, my municipal government decided next week that they were going to build a massive, I don't want to say hydroelectric, like they were going to build a massive solar farm here in the desert and pre-sell the electricity. I would buy the next, I don't know, 5 or 10 years worth of electricity to help crowdfund and fund that project. And it makes me want to ask you, how much do you think entrepreneurs have an influence in this versus the change needing to be made at the scale of governments or existing national corporations?
No, we need both. We need both. You're absolutely right, because it was entrepreneur who created the big internet companies that we all use now, or the computers that we are using, you and me right now, to talk to each other virtually. And there are entrepreneurs who are developing substitutes to plastic that have all the same virtues as plastic, but they are compostable, right? So we do need both, and we cannot have enough people working on developing ideas, right? And many of these ideas will not work, but that has never stopped humans before. That has never stopped humans before. This is the way science advances, and we cannot have enough entrepreneurs trying things, because right now it's all hands on deck. We need everybody doing their thing. If you are an engineer, you can maybe help develop this substitute for plastic. If you are a musician, maybe you can reach people emotionally through your songs about the state of the planet. If you are a filmmaker, maybe you can feature some success stories so people see, wow, it actually works if we do this. If we protect more areas, nature will bounce back and people will benefit. So if these guys have done it in India or Congo or Mexico, we can do it here too. So, people have to use their talents and their passion so we can all achieve this common purpose.
Well, that's really comforting to hear, because I am not a gifted engineer, but I do have a platform, and I'm glad that we've been able to use it for influencing folks, hopefully, to make better decisions when it comes to our oceans. Now, I do want to ask you about your new book. So the book is coming out on the 25th of August, 2020, for those of you listening years down the way, and it is called The Nature of Nature. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, this book is my love letter to the planet. Yeah, I wrote the book first with the intention of telling stories, some personal stories, and then stories of other scientists who realized how species interact with each other in nature and create these wonderful ecosystems that we are all dependent on. But I also wanted to make sure that there was a clear moral imperative for preserving all this biodiversity, all these species, all these ecosystems. In addition to the utility, right, that everything that we need to survive depends on the work of other species. But there is also this moral argument that all these species have an intrinsic right to exist. They haven't been put here just for us to exploit, to be our slaves, right? And also I wanted to make sure that there was a strong economic argument that more protection of nature is actually economically more beneficial than continuing to destroy nature. But then COVID-19 happened, and the book was ready to go to the printer. And I, after thinking about it for a little bit, I called my editor and said, "Hey, Susan, can we stop the process?" And she said, "You have 2 weeks." So I wrote an epilogue. I wrote a last chapter on the nature of coronavirus, making that link between the health of nature and our individual health, making the link between our broken relationship with nature and a pandemic that is affecting every single human on the planet, except maybe for a few people who are in a base in Antarctica, and they have been isolated for months. But that was the thing. It started as a book of stories about how nature works and how wonderful it is and how necessary this is for our survival and why it makes ethical sense and why it makes economic sense. And now, also, thanks to the pandemic, unfortunately, why our very survival depends on the health of the natural world and the solution. creating more protected areas, banning wildlife trade, and doing all these things that are totally feasible. We know that when they are well managed, they work very well for nature, for people, and for the economy.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to reading it. And I do want to ask, can we give people, I mean, November is a long time to wait to vote. Can we give people some practical homework that they can do this week, whether it's signing up for a newsletter, signing a petition, following a particular thought leader, writing a letter to their congressman or woman? What is one or two small actions that you would like for people to take this week? Maybe pick up a copy of the book, whatever it may be.
Okay, since you prompted me, one, pick a copy of the book. You can pre-order now online. Whatever books are sold online, people know where to find those. Two, go to a website of the Campaign for Nature, campaignfornature.org, campaignfornature.org. And there is information about what's the problem, why we need 30% of the planet protected. And there is a petition there. Very simple. You can sign there and add your name to millions of people around the world who are asking world leaders to next year in China at the meeting of the UN Convention on Biodiversity, the countries of the world are going to decide how much more space we are willing to give to nature. And this is a key moment for the future of humanity and the rest of life on the planet. So please add your name to the petition. And three, just do some research offline if you want about the plant-based diet. It's been transformational for me. I've never felt healthier. I've never felt stronger. I work out and I feel, I've grown muscle with the plant-based diet, and I feel better than ever. My mental health I hope it's in good shape. So these are three things that are easy to do. People can start today.
Fantastic. And I have already signed and tweeted about this petition. Please, please, please make sure to check it out, everyone. Campaignfornature.org. We'll put that link and the link to the book as well in the podcast. Dr. Sala, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed learning from you, and I hope we keep in touch. But before I let you go, I want to ask you one question that I always ask guests before they take off, which is, if people take one big message away from this episode, and we've covered so many different important messages, what's the one that you hope they carry with them for the rest of their lives?
Mother is like our nature, and you don't abuse your mother. Nature gives us everything we need to survive. And nature can continue giving us everything we need: food, clean water, oxygen, and rain, many other wonderful things, if we just give her some space. If we just give her some space, nature has this extraordinary ability to bounce back.
An incredible message to end on. Dr. Enric Sala, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit superhuman.blog. While you're at it, please take a moment to share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.